Hey everybody, Neil here from Tz'ikin with my good friend
Josh, farm manager and course co-facilitator here on the farm.
on our awesome permaculture immersion program. Today we're doing round 2 of our biochar series. So in the last video we showed you how the mechanics behind making biochar, and we talked a little bit about what this amazing stuff is. Mineralized carbon that's gonna stay in our soil forever basically, and it's gonna improve. Weirdly enough, it simultaneously improves the drainage of the soil by making it tilthier and fluffier because it's a mineral,
And also with the water retention as well.
yeah, imagine that, something that can make it retain water better and drain better
At the same time.
Amazing. Incredible. But there's a few things we want to understand about this. So what happens if I just slap this on my garden, Josh?
You could potentially kill everything within the vicinity of the biochar.
Why is that?
Very dangerous. It's got very high absorption and retention capabilities. I like to think of it as a sponge. It absorbs and holds on to water and nutrients very well. But if we don't inoculate it with life, introduce nutrients and water to it beforehand, it's potentially very hazardous for it in the soil.
Yeah, hazardous is probably a strong word. I would say it's potentially is damaging in the short term. Specifically, I think because it'll rob. This wants to be charged, and if it's not charged before you add it, it's going to outcompete your plants for nitrogen, especially, right?
Yeah.
So you might see. I've seen this the first time I ever used this. I added it into my garden, and all my little veggie starts just shriveled up because it outcompetes them for nitrogen. It just takes all the available nitrogen in the soil and it holds on to it, which in the long term is actually great, but in the short term it's absolutely not what we want for our veggie gardens. So what are we going to do instead?
Instead of doing that, we're going to make sure that it's charged with nutrients and water before we add it to the soil. So instead of competing with our plants for the nitrogen, like Neil said, we're actually adding nutrients and water into it. And yeah, because of their high retention capabilities, the nutrients and water will be slowly releasing over time, not just being able to be taken away.
And so we're going to do that with this compost, right? This is compost from our animal house, from our animal polyculture. Look at that stuff. Really, what have we got in this compost? We got straw and dry leaves are our main sources of carbon. We add a lot of ash to this stuff. Ash from our fire in the early stages of it. And ash is an interesting thing to add. Ash is another byproduct of this sauna. That's another interesting thing to add to your compost. It doesn't have any carbon in it, but it's all the minerals. It's the inorganic component, and that's a great thing to add at the start of the composting process because it's going to bring up your pH. It's going to make the compost more alkaline. But there's also an extraordinary thing about adding minerals to a compost pile because they become biologically available through the composting process. All of the microorganisms that actually turn this from fresh manure, they also digest the minerals and make them available to the plants. And adding ash to your compost is something I really recommend. But this is our finished compost. You can see it's fluffy black. It's teeming with life because this has been broken down by all different kinds of microbes, and now it's ready. It smells delicious, and all of these microbes and all of these nutrients, they're gonna have a great time charging this stuff and inhabiting it. Actually, if we look at this biochar under a microscope, it has these huge porous
complex fibers ducking and weaving through each other. So many little nooks and crannies for microbes to be able to inhabit, crawl between, hiding from predators. And yeah, essentially they call it housing for microorganisms.
Housing for microorganisms. It's like community housing program.
So we support
for those poor microorganisms.
Spoil bastards.
Okay, so let's do it. So we got our compost. We're gonna add this in. What's our ratio here, Josh?
We go 50-50.
50-50. So 50% compost. So about half of the bucket. And now 50% biochar. And as Josh adds this stuff in, I'm just going to mix it up here. This stuff is just getting blacker and nicer looking by the addition. This is really fun. I think it's good for your hands as well, good for your skin.
Exfoliating.
It's exfoliating, it's therapeutic. And now that we've got this mostly full, now the final part, Josh, is what?
Adding water to it.
Adding water to it. Why do we do that?
As we were saying, we want to make sure it's charged with nutrients, microbes, and water as well. I like to think of biochar as a sponge. We don't want to just throw a dry sponge into the garden. We want that sponge to have nutrients and water in it already. There we go.
Look at that.
Juicy goodness.
Juicy goodness. So we're gonna leave this to sit now for how long, Josh?
5 to 7 days. Just more. Yeah. More time is better.
5 to 7 days. And I mean, you can pee in this bucket, you can add extra nitrogen to it if you want. But yeah, 5 to 7 days to get this fully charged and ready. And then we just add it into our garden in small amounts. Most of what we'll add to our garden will be this ordinary compost. And then about 10% of this stuff every time we renovate a bed.
Yep.
And what a difference it's been making, eh?
Amazing.
Yeah, let us know how you go with your own biochar projects. Remember, keys are, if you're going to make the biochar, find a second use for that heat. Think like a permaculturalist. Make it, you can make it out of just about any dry organic material. Charge it, add it to your garden, and enjoy.
Awesome. Enjoy. I do.